The call came at 6:43 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was already up, already dressed, already standing at the kitchen window, watching the sun come through the red maples in the backyard. I'd been awake since 4. Something in me, the same thing that woke me the night my husband's car didn't come up the driveway, the night my father had his first stroke, something had been pulling at me for hours. I picked up on the first ring. Mom. My son's voice. Thin. Wrong. I didn't say anything. I waited. She made me leave. She called security, and they walked me out of my own office and Darlene. He stopped. I heard him breathe. Darlene had a box of my things waiting at the front desk, like I was nobody, like I was a stranger they'd found wandering the halls. I set down my coffee cup very carefully on the counter. Where are you right now? Parking garage on 5th. I'm sitting in my car. Stay there, I said. I'm coming. The drive downtown took me 28 minutes. I know that stretch of highway the way I know my own handwriting. Every merge, every pothole near the Millbrook overpass, every place the morning light hits the guardrail wrong and blinds you for half a second. I drove it for 31 years going to work. I could do it in my sleep. My son was sitting in his car on the second level of the garage, engine off, windows fogged a little from his breath. He's 41 years old. He has his father's dark eyes and his grandfather's stubborn jaw, and he looked, in that moment, like he was 12 years old and someone had told him the dog died. I tapped on the passenger window. He unlocked the door. I got in. The box on the back seat held a coffee mug, a framed photo of the two of us from his college graduation, 3 notebooks, a phone charger, and a small wooden paperweight his daughter had painted for him one Father's Day. Blue handprint on one side, Daddy in crooked letters on the other. I looked at that box for a long moment. Then I looked at my son. Tell me everything, I said, from the beginning. He had met my daughter-in-law 8 years ago at a conference in Atlanta. She was finishing her MBA. He was there, representing the regional division of an architecture firm. She was sharp and funny, and she laughed at his terrible jokes. And 3 weeks later, he called me from a gas station in Tennessee, grinning so hard I could hear it through the phone, to tell me he thought he might have met the person he was going to marry. I liked her well enough at first. I want to be honest about that. She was intelligent, put together, the kind of woman who sends thank you notes within 48 hours and always knows the right wine to bring. Her family had money, serious money, the kind that has been there so long it stops announcing itself. Her father ran a commercial real estate development company. Thorn Properties. You'd know the name if you'd spent any time in this part of Tennessee. They had the Thorn building on Cumberland Avenue, the Thorn Plaza development out by the interstate. 3 hotels, a shopping center, and fingers in about 15 other ventures I probably didn't even know about. When my son married her, he came to work for her father. That was the first thing I didn't say anything about. He was talented. He had a degree from a good school, and nearly a decade of real work experience, and he was being handed a title that should have taken 15 years to earn. I watched him settle into that office like a man moving into a house that's a little too big for him. Grateful, trying to fill the rooms. He worked hard. He was always working. My daughter-in-law ran the marketing side of things. Together they were supposed to be the next generation of Thorn Properties. Then she got pregnant, and something shifted. I don't know exactly when it started. These things rarely have a single moment you can point to. It's more like a slow change in the weather, the temperature dropping degree by degree until one morning you walk outside and realize it's been winter for a long time, and you just hadn't noticed. My son started calling less. When I saw him at holidays, he was quieter than usual, watchful in a way that made me uncomfortable. My daughter-in-law started answering questions that had been directed at him. Small things. Someone would ask what they thought about the new development going up on the river, and before he could open his mouth, she'd be talking. Not rudely, smoothly. So smoothly you might not even catch it. Her father started doing the same thing. My son's title didn't change, but his responsibilities did. quietly, bit by bit. Projects he'd been leading got reassigned. Decisions that had once come to his desk started bypassing him altogether. When I asked him about it once, the Christmas before last, he said things were fine. The company was restructuring. It was temporary. He said it the way people say things they need to believe. His father-in-law called him into a meeting 3 weeks before the morning I drove to that parking garage. My son told me about it there in the car, staring at his hands. Her father had sat across the desk from him, the big mahogany desk in the corner office that looked out over the river, and explained, very calmly, very reasonably, that the company was moving in a new direction, that my son's position was being eliminated, that given the family circumstances they wanted to handle it discreetly, privately, no need to involve HR, no need to make it a whole production. There would be a severance package. It was generous, her father said. More than fair. My son had asked about his projects, the River District development, the Caldwell Street renovation he'd been working on for 14 months. Her father had said those would be absorbed by other members of the team. My son had asked to speak to his wife. Her father had said she was aware of the decision and was in agreement. My son sat across that mahogany desk and nodded and shook his father-in-law's hand and walked out of the building and drove home and did not tell me about any of it for 3 weeks. He kept going to this office every morning, kept leaving at the same time, coming home at the same time, telling my daughter-in-law things were fine at work. I don't know what he was doing during those 8 hours every day. Sitting in coffee shops, maybe. Walking. Trying to figure out how to say out loud what had happened to him. The morning they found out, she called security. I sat in that parking garage for a long time. My son cried a little, and then stopped and apologized for crying, and I told him not to apologize, and he cried a little more. I handed him the napkins from my glove compartment. 63 years old, and I still keep a stack of napkins in the glove compartment. Old habit. When you raise children, you learn to always have napkins. When he was steadier, I asked him about my granddaughter. She's with Darlene, he said. I mean, with my wife. At the house. He paused. I don't know how this is going to work. The house is, technically, it's in the family trust. Her family's trust. I nodded slowly. And your name is on the mortgage. He shook his head. I looked out through the fogged windshield at the concrete wall of the parking garage. Okay, I said. Mom, I know that look. What look? The one where you're already thinking 6 steps ahead, and you're not going to tell me what they are yet. I smiled at him. The same smile I gave his father 38 years ago when the bank tried to lowball us on the refinancing of the store property, and I told him not to worry. I had something to show them. Drive yourself home, I said. Be calm. Be kind. Don't fight about the house. Don't fight about your daughter. Don't give them any reason to paint you as the problem. Can you do that? I don't know. I don't know. You can, I said. You're better at this than you think. I squeezed his hand once. Then I got out of the car and walked back to my own. I should explain something. My husband, Bernard. God rest him. He's been gone 11 years now. Bernard was the face of everything we built together. He walked into rooms first. He shook hands first. He gave the toasts and signed the checks and had his name on the letterhead. That was fine. That was what worked for us, and I want to be clear that it was a partnership. A real one, not the kind where one person does all the work and the other takes all the credit, but the land was mine. My family had been in this county since before it was a county. My great-grandmother homesteaded 40 acres east of town. My grandmother added to it. My mother added to it. By the time it came to me, it was a complicated, unglamorous, deeply valuable thing. Mineral rights, timber rights, a creek easement, 3 separate parcels with 3 separate histories, the kind of property that looks like nothing on a map and means everything to people who understand what they're looking at. When Bernard and I were building the store, early on, we needed capital. We could have borrowed against the land. I chose not to. The land stayed in my name, separate from the business, separate from everything. Bernard understood why, and he agreed. Some things you keep clear. When Bernard died, the land stayed mine. Clear title, no disputes. I am not a wealthy woman in the way that Thorn Properties is wealthy. I don't have hotels or shopping centers. What I have is 47 acres on the east side of this county that I have managed and leased and shepherded for 30+ years, and I know every inch of it the way I know my own children. Including the 12 acres on the eastern edge that Thorn Properties has been leasing for the past 9 years, including the foundation still poured on my land of what was about to become the centerpiece of their entire River District development. I called my attorney from the car. Her name is Marvella, and she has been handling my family's business since before I had gray hair, and she is as the sharpest person I know in any room she walks into. I told her what happened with my son. I told her I wanted to review the current lease terms for the eastern parcel. I told her I wanted to understand precisely what the renewal window looked like. There was a pause. The lease has a 90-day renewal notice requirement, she said. Either party has to give written notice 90 days before expiration. And when does it expire? Another pause. Shorter, 6 weeks, she said. They haven't filed renewal notice. I sat with that for a moment. And the foundation work on the River District project, I said. That's on my parcel. The eastern section. Yes, I have the survey here. Approximately 60% of the planned footprint is on your land. I looked out the windshield at the highway. Marvella, I said, I'm going to need you to prepare something for me. I didn't rush it. That's the part that surprised my son when I eventually told him. He expected urgency, some dramatic confrontation, some immediate counterstrike. That's not how this works. That's never how this works. The people who win these things are not the ones who move fastest. They're the ones who move at exactly the right moment. I spent 2 weeks doing nothing visible. Internally, I had Marvella pull the full lease history. I had a land survey updated. I reviewed 9 years of correspondence between my property management and Thorn Properties. I contacted a commercial real estate attorney in Nashville for a second opinion on 3 specific questions. I had coffee with an old friend who spent 30 years in county planning and zoning, and we talked about the River District project and the permits and the timeline, and he said some things over his coffee cup that were very illuminating. At home, I was quiet. I called my son every couple of days. He was staying in a hotel. He'd moved out of the house to keep things calm, the way I told him to. He saw my granddaughter on Tuesdays and Saturdays. His wife had hired an attorney. Her father had hired an attorney. My son had hired one too, a good one, on my recommendation. He didn't know what I was doing on my side. I told him I was handling some property matters, and he didn't ask further, and I didn't offer. My daughter-in-law's father, from what I understood, knew I owned the eastern parcel. Of course he knew. It would be in the title search from when the lease was originally drawn up. What he may not have fully appreciated, what perhaps he believed didn't matter, was that the lease had not been renewed. He had been building on land he did not have a current agreement to use, and he had recently fired my son. The Thorn Properties annual dinner was held every March at the Hartwell Room of the Pinnacle Hotel. I had attended once years ago as my son's guest. It was the kind of event where the tables had small printed cards with everyone's name, and the centerpieces were fresh gardenias, and the people with the most money stood at the back with drinks and spoke just loudly enough to be overheard. I was not on the guest list this year. I did not need to be. Marvella filed the non-renewal notice on the eastern parcel on the Tuesday before the dinner. Certified mail delivered to the registered address of Thorn Properties. She also sent a courtesy copy to their legal department. I asked her to send one more letter, personal. To my daughter-in-law's father direct, not threatening, just factual. The lease would expire in 6 weeks. I would be evaluating my options for the parcel, including sale, alternate development, or simply returning it to agricultural use. Given the current foundation work on the property, I wanted to flag this early so there would be no surprise. No surprise. Marvella thought the phrasing was particularly elegant. He called me the next morning. My daughter-in-law's father, not his attorney, him personally. I let it go to voicemail, twice. On the third call, I answered. He was cordial, controlled. Men like him are always controlled. It's the thing they practice most. He said he appreciated me reaching out directly and he wanted to discuss the situation. He said he was sure there was a way to make this work for everyone. He said he had always had the highest respect for me and for Bernard's memory. I said I appreciated that. He said perhaps we could meet, sit down together, come to an arrangement. I said I'd have to check my calendar and have Marvella's office reach out to coordinate. He paused, just briefly. Of course, he said. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a moment. Then I poured myself a second cup of coffee and drank it standing at the window, looking at the red maples. And I thought about my mother, sitting at her own kitchen table going through land records with a pencil and a yellow legal pad the summer her neighbor tried to claim the creek easement. She had been patient and thorough and completely without anger, and she had won. I come from patient women. The meeting was at Marvella's office, not his. He arrived with 2 attorneys. I arrived with Marvella and a revised survey and a folder of documentation that went back 9 years. He opened by talking about the River District project, the scope of it, the investment, the jobs it would create, the legacy. He was good at this. He'd been doing it for 40 years, making things sound inevitable and visionary and already half accomplished. The kind of talk that's meant to make you feel like resistance is not just inconvenient, but somehow embarrassing. I listened. I nodded once or twice. When he finished, I looked at Marvella. She opened the folder. We walked him through the lease history, the renewal window, the current status, the survey showing the foundation footprint relative to the parcel boundary, the county records showing the permits and the projected timeline. All of it quiet, all of it factual, all of it documented. One of his attorneys leaned over and said something in his ear. He looked at me across the table. For the first time since I'd known him, 7 years, holidays, dinners, one very uncomfortable Thanksgiving, I saw something behind his eyes that was not confidence. "What is it that you want?" he said. I had thought carefully about how to answer that question. "I want my son reinstated," I said. "Full title, full responsibilities. The projects he was leading restored to him. Not a new position, his position." He started to speak. "I'm not finished," I said gently. "I want that in writing with Marvella's office copied within 10 business days. I want separation agreement voided and the severance offer withdrawn. And I want it done without any characterization of this as a favor or a family matter. He earned his place, he keeps it." The room was very quiet. "And the land?" he said. "I'll renew the lease," I said. "Standard terms. We've had a fine working relationship for 9 years, and I don't see a reason that can't continue." He looked at me for a long moment. "That's all?" "That's all." He was expecting something larger, something punitive. He'd been preparing for a bigger fight, and I'd handed him an exit that cost him nothing except his son-in-law's job security and a small piece of his pride. Smart men usually take that exit. It's the vain ones who don't. He was smart. My son called me on a Thursday evening, 10 days later. "I got a letter from their attorney," he said. "Mom, my position's been reinstated. Full title. They're calling it an organizational restructuring reversal, whatever that means. It means they changed their minds," I said. "How did you?" He stopped, started again. "The land, the eastern parcel. Did you?" "I renewed the lease," I said. "We're fine." Silence on the line. "Mom, yes, how long had you known?" I thought about that. Known that the lease was coming up? About 6 months. I keep track of all the parcels. And you waited. You didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. At the time. He was quiet again for a moment. Outside my window, the maples had gone fully red, the color so deep it looked almost black against the evening sky. "Did you go into that meeting knowing he'd say yes?" "I went into that meeting knowing I had every right to say no to whatever he asked me," I said. "That's different, but it tends to lead to the same place. My son and his wife are still working things out. I won't pretend otherwise. What happened between them is not something a property lease can fix, and I'm not foolish enough to think my involvement solved any of the real damage. They're in counseling. They're taking it slowly. My granddaughter is doing well. She's 6, she's resilient, she has her father's dark eyes and her grandmother's way of watching a room before she decides to say anything. I see her on Sundays. We bake. Last week she wanted to make lemon cookies, and we made lemon cookies, and she ate 4 of them before dinner. And I didn't say a word about it because she's 6 and they were very good cookies. My daughter-in-law came to one of those Sundays a few weeks ago. Sat at my kitchen table. She didn't bring it up directly, and I didn't bring it up directly, and we talked about the school year and a trip she and my granddaughter were planning to see her sister and whether the cookies needed more zest. Before she left, she stood in my front doorway for a moment. "I want you to know," she said, "that I didn't. It wasn't my idea to do it the way they did it. I want you to know that." I looked at her. "I believe you," I said. "Whether I entirely do, I'll keep to myself. Some things are better held gently than examined too closely." She loves my son, I think. She got turned around somewhere. People do. The question is whether they can find their way back. I have been asked, since all of this, what I would say to women who find themselves in that position. Watching someone they love get diminished, bit, by people who mistake power for righteousness. Waiting, not knowing what to do. I think about my mother with her yellow legal pad. I think about the creek easement. Here is what I know. The people who do this, who slowly, carefully remove someone from their own life, they count on you not knowing what you have. They count on you not understanding the value of what you're sitting on. They count on you being too polite, too uncertain, too afraid of being called difficult to lay what you actually own on the table. They are surprised every single time when you do. Not angry, not dramatic, not vengeful. Just quiet and clear and completely, unmistakably certain of what belongs to you. That's enough. Most of the time, that is more than enough. My mother knew that. I learned it from her. And someday, if she needs it, my granddaughter will learn it from me. Sitting at this kitchen table, eating lemon cookies, watching how her grandmother handles the rooms she walks into. Some things are worth more than people realize, especially the things that have been in the family a long time.